perhaps products and services. Then the latter has a lot to do with and I believe when I heard the question, I believe it had to do with how do you take position as a risk practitioner? Does that sum up your three questions? Or does that sum up your inquiry?
Yes, it does.
So in short, you have new inquiries, new opportunities should undergo a sort of feasibility assessment. And the feasibility assessment would determine, of course, based on the variables that you would have set, your parameters, would assist in determining the viability of that new product and or service. You often see this with existing products and services within organizations where there's this continuous or dynamic assessment on value proposition. So it's answering the question, are we truly getting the return on investment when we think about what we are offering to the specific market, and across customer segmentations, high, medium, low risk, customer typologies, upper, middle class, different industry segments. So the risk assessment, well, the feasibility study or feasibility assessment is really a risk assessment. And then it should really drive almost like a sort of SWOT analysis, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, which then allow you to transition into your next question, which is about risk identification, risk measurement, and defining, more importantly, your tolerances and appetite when you think about that new product or service. If you consider that assessment cocktail, you need to be able to calibrate it in the context of your organization's culture, its values, its overall strategy. Most institutions or approaches would really find a level playing field within the vision and mission statement, but it's within the suite of what is our purpose, what do we believe in, what our values model. So I take this new opportunity and I need to align this. If you remember the quadrant or refer to the quadrant, I need to align interest. Then I go into the fundamental pillars of Basel. Is the opportunity, is the new product or service in alignment with my ability to afford it from a working capital standpoint? Do I have sufficiency of risk management buoyancy factors, whether it's risk transfer by insurance, indemnities? Am I even knowledgeable or fully aware of the risk associated with this? Do I have the adequate people, processes, systems to execute, manage, properly service, and maintain not just the first line of defense, but also the controlled environment, and then ultimately a space where we can look at new opportunities within an opportunity. So you then take it a further layer where in your controlled environment, once sufficiently matured, you can have stress testing, reverse stress testing, to re-engineer future value considerations against present value positions, which then allows you to consider your scale to market, your cost to market, and then your overall time to market. This then allows you to transition to your next position, or the next element of your question, which is, what should the risk manager do? At this point, the risk manager wants to really provide continuous clarity surrounding culture, appetite, tolerances, because we're really advisors. We're advisors within the scope and sphere of that organization. So the language, the culture should be reinforced through your capacity. I would have earlier alluded to in previous sessions that you don't have to be titled a risk manager to execute a risk function. So risk is embodied within every capacity. There's just different layers and different tiers. But what we see trending today is the need for an enterprise risk management function that acts as a nucleus and a central point to complete the picture for everyone's appreciation of where the organization is headed, how it's progressing, what adjustments it needs to make, and really build depth in context of its strategy and its mission and vision statement. So when you look at the second line of defense function, you appreciate that it reports directly at a governance level, directly to the board, and sometimes even become an active participant in some of the specialized board committees and executive committees. And the reason being is because you need to be able to have this not just independent view, but sufficient aptitude and fortitude within these committees to shift behaviors, expected outcomes in the right direction. Management is often focused on income generating approaches or cost saving approaches. And the risk practitioner should be the one to step in and try to achieve a healthy balance to a reasonable degree. The profession is founded on reasonableness, right? You'll often hear, or you may read, risk management is about managing risk to an acceptable level. So it's important when you look at new products, services, opportunities, emerging threats, when you think about your assessments, you have to be able to appreciate that risk in its fullness as a principle, which is a measure of uncertainty, will always exist. So its omnipresence within organizations just need to be effectively managed. So that's a context of absolute risk. You want to, throughout the three contexts of the questions raised within that really one consolidated question, is you want to remain buoyant. You want to, even at sometimes, take a step back so that you build four eyes principles or proper segregation of assessment to preserve integrity of your own position. You want to be able to do this within your controlled environment to avoid biases. Of course, we talked about cognitive biases and certain physiological and psychological attributes that may impair your overall view. Independence has a very thin line. Often the human behavior and or the emotion, when you are attached to an expected outcome, and it could be subject to either your exposure, perhaps relationships within the organization to drive certain outcomes. So you have to be careful about that, because for audit, for example, you have AQR. So there's this audit quality review. Risk managers are subject to the same assessment. So your documentation is going to be important. Your regular ongoing engagement is going to be important. And the degree of reasonableness to preserve your integrity, objectivity, and independence is important. At any time you see a corrosive impact towards what you're trying to achieve in the balance of the equation, and again, this is the balance of business activities in its attainment of expected outcomes, you have to be able to take a step back and allow for the organization to sort of calibrate its own self-risk view. And so the concept of self-assessment, it was a cost-effective way to build risk appetite, but at the same build risk aptitude across different departments and functional areas. So they are really truly the risk champions or the risk owners.
I have a little question to piggyback off that. What happens when the risk changes? Like, remember a few years ago, they what it called? Like when we had to adjust to the number of houses now being viable. Like, what happens when the risk changes?
What happens when the risk changes in the context of a new opportunity, like in the relative to your example?
Yeah, and the fact, right, to my example, like if, like we never used to, though, I mean, those establishments were considered now high risk, right? And they were before they became more viable in the Bahamas. They're now considered income and all this stuff. Like, what happens when a risk that was so high now changes, and well, like, how would you move towards that, or how would you assess that? Because then even when that did happen, some things also were not, that were low risk became high risk. And then certain companies and markets and stocks and people who were invested in certain like banks or financial institutions pulled away. You understand what I mean?
Right.
So what happens when we have a change like that?
All right, so let's slow it down a bit. Risk is a measure of uncertainty. If what I'm hearing from your question is, what is the risk management's posture relative to a product or service that has now been integrated, right?
Right.
So we've designed policy, procedures, We have designed our control environment. We have all of the structures now in place. So how do you measure the risk? Subsequent design and implementation of a new opportunity is the question.
Yeah, yes, sorry, my freaking out. Yes.
So it's a good question, and I'm glad you asked that. At that point, once you've completed design and implementation, it's no longer truly in the sphere of risk. It's now in the sphere of compliance.
Okay.
So you now have clear parameters in which you should operate. Remember, risk is a measure of uncertainty. So if I'm certain that after completeness of my assessment, so there's a new opportunity out there. And I have determined what my tolerance is of this opportunity. Let's take cryptocurrencies, for example, right? Everyone isn't doing it. Last session, we talked about the window of opportunity. So everyone understands fundamentally that risk equals reward, right? Or there's a unique balance between a higher level of ROI, or it's really inversely correlated with the high value of ROI with the high level of risk, positively correlated with the high level of risk you undertake, right? So that's a positive correlation. Apologies. So now you sort of align cultures, attitudes, and behaviors within the context of uncertainty. And you're able to risk segment either your business, your customers, and even industry factors, right? So you segment who is risk averse, who is risk acceptant, who is risk neutral. And then you're able to, when you think about the investment life cycle or the wealth cycle at an institution level or a customer level, you're now able to determine how I need to align my risk management aptitude. If I have a risk acceptance culture, I am going to, as the risk practitioner, I am going to understand what type of budgetary capital allocation I can utilize to invest in crypto. And then I will design certain, let's say, policy and business implication assessment and performance to help the board, senior management, and perhaps even customers that may want to be interested in the crypto space to appreciate these are some of the potential expected outcomes when I consider this crypto investment. There's high volatility, there's high velocity, there's the opportunity of return. What are some of the outcomes in the short run? What are some of the outcomes in the long run? So the risk manager would function in the design of, and there's a lot of design. So it's in the design of the macroeconomic context of the crypto, again, new opportunity. So it doesn't make it right or wrong. And it doesn't mean that you're able to forecast the future. You are measuring to a degree of reasonableness your ability to service cryptocurrency, their products, their tokens to an institution or the customer. And once that design has been established, and of course, this is often done with working groups and consultants, and taking into consideration maybe white paper discussions with your customers and in other internal and external stakeholders. And as the consultant, you make the recommendation, going back to that first point on the assessment. And the recommendation will support any business decision. So the business now, once received completion of the recommendation and all of the supporting documents, of course, they now can make a decision. So once a decision is made, risk management steps away, because I've supported you with design in an area of uncertainty, and the business has made a decision as to how it wants to operate in this space. I've supported business decision from legislation. I've supported the business decision from what are some of the recommendations relative to controls, the test of controls, completeness on due diligence and other compliance variables, who are the risk owners, how do you ensure proper segregation of duties, ensure it's auditable, all those various things. Now, I pass it to the business owner. They sign off, they own it. And now it becomes a management between compliance and the business owner. And then the assessment of ongoing or dynamic either control deficiencies is with audit. But if you want to integrate risk will come into play as the dynamics of the principal product of cryptocurrency changes. Because remember, there's the time value of an opportunity. So in 2020 or 2019, my risk of onboarding, investing, and maintaining cryptocurrency is now different in 2022. So as a measure of buoyancy, you have, again, your hedging and your risk transfer elements, your indemnities. You'll often see these exemption clauses and different investment prospectus that speak to, the customer being aware, or be the dicta, right? Make the customer aware. So you're ensuring that the customer understands you are investing this at your own risk, particularly for high risk undertakings. So those are covered. But as time changes, to your point, time value changes, the parameters change, the risk change, and then we need to step in, which is why there's often an annual or a periodic assessment to a reasonable degree, right? And the reasonableness is subject to your tolerance. So I hope that's a sufficient coverage and appreciation.
Thank you.
So for everyone that has just joined in, this is our last session on the module 4. We would have substantively covered all of the modules. And this is about really a wrap up and an appreciation of modules 1 through 4, but in particular modules 3 and 4. To give you an overview, answer any questions that you may have, or if you need to put together any pieces, address any gaps in your reading, or maybe points of clarity, etc. So the point of discussion earlier was the basis of a sort of 3-point question that looked at new opportunities. What is the risk manager's role and function in the context of new opportunities? Second point, how do you assess the risk, and what are some of the parameters of context relative to the risk, particularly if there are new and emerging risks as with the maturation of that opportunity within an organization or a market. And then what is the risk manager's view? Like, what should they do once certain segments are completed? What's the role of business? And how do you ensure proper integration, rather, of the new opportunity while maintaining completeness and a dynamic view of risk? So interestingly, that sounded like almost like the assignment. I had hoped that I would have had the actual assignment to go through it with you all, at least an approach that I would have taken in answering the assignment. So, yes. Any questions? General observations, inquiries? Modules 1 through 4. Teresa, is something, I'm seeing a point from Teresa in the chat. Let's go through the assignment. Well, it's still with Binger, just to let you know. Is something wrong with the mic? I imagine so, right? Any questions?
You know, early 2020.
Hi, everyone. So Teresa, relative to the assignment, that's still a Binger. I don't have the actual question with me. So I know that there were attempts to submit it, but I didn't receive the question. Okay. So everyone is clear. Wonderful. So your next session is module 5. I don't recall who the lecturer is. Does anybody have their course program with them to at least advise the name of module 5?
I'm not sure if it's still going to be Christine Archer. I believe I saw her name.
Okay, that sounds like
I
corporate
see.
governance.
Oh, sorry. Continue.
Go ahead, go ahead.
No, I saw on the, oh, no. Never mind. No, never mind.
Okay, so for the benefit of while we're here, I made some inquiries relative to the assignments as promised. The intent is, once we receive those back, then we will take a decision to either have some of yourselves, those that perhaps may not have done so well, either complete an additional assignment or some other sort of risk-weighted approach to your examination. So I haven't received the assignments or a final position as to what that overall approach would be, but we're going to endeavor to do our best to ensure that everyone is able to at least properly position themselves to succeed within the class. So in essence, not to be disadvantaged should module 3 have been the requisite basis prior submission of the assignment. Okay. So
who will, you say you don't know when, but they'll send it to us via email, that's what you're saying, the grade, so if we need to do something else, that's what you're saying?
yeah, so once final response, we're going to have a committee meeting to determine what the approach is. And of course, we have to take into account thematic observations relative to any noted deficiencies by Scotland. And then we,
when is
we
the
will-
exam? The other exam, you say June?
I didn't mention anything about an exam.
No, that was prior, you said June prior to this, to today.
That may have been Miguel.
Okay,
But notwithstanding that, though, I believe the intent, if you finish, I think we were trying to anticipate the date of the exam. So if you're doing module 5, this is March module 5, and then April module 6. There's usually a month lag to support review. And then the following month, you'll have your exam. I believe some communications were exchanged. Well, firstly, that lands in June. And then there was some communications that supported, I think it was a Saturday, and I think it's a total of 8 students. So everyone would have been able to be accommodated either in the morning or afternoon, but some correspondence was sent to that. Yeah.
okay, I see Teresa say it's June 11th. So I guess, it's, yeah. And I put the assignment questions in the chat, so you could look at it if you want to.
Okay, so at this point, I don't think that'll be too fruitful because we would need the actual case in front of us. Let's see, review the documents and prioritize the main risk. Okay, did anybody have any challenges with question 1? So are we going to go through this, or?
I know Teresa, oh, no message. Teresa wants to go through, but her mic is down, so you have to give her a minute to type.
Well, here is my recommendation relative to the assignment, because there needs to be some engagement relative to this. And quite frankly, I don't think that's going to happen. So my view is once we receive the results of the assignment, then we'll be able to ascertain what were some of the challenges and opportunities within the context of each of the questions. At this point, I wouldn't want us to sort of concern ourselves as to how we would have answered it and, you know, create this anxiety as to what the actual results would be. When we get that back, there's a couple of things that can happen. If there's a mean score that supports everyone passing, that's great, favorable. And then you could sort of self-assess where you may have fallen off the rails. Alternatively, if there is a converse effect in the negative position, then we can all come together and take a view as to how we're going to approach either the same or an alternate assignment.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah. So if there are no questions, I trust everyone will have a wonderful evening. Continue to read your modules. And I think everyone will do well. We've had, and I think this was an excellent opportunity to meet you all. We've had relatively engaging discussions. I think everyone is moving in the right direction in terms of their appreciation for the discipline. I would still encourage more reading, and it will really support any clarity or ambiguity that you may have with respect to the certification course, what it means to you, and how you can certainly apply it in your career and development within financial services in general, and as of course as a risk professional in particular. So thank you all for the opportunity to go through modules 3 and 4 with you. Of course, some of you, well, all of you actually have access to my email. If you have any questions or concerns throughout module 6, from 1 to module 6. And I will either directly or through the Institute with Miguel or any one of the other representatives revert with the update on the assignment as well as the exam. So
Okay,
thank you.
you.
All right, so thank you everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
You too. Good night, everyone.
Good night. For your birthday.
Ooh, so cool.